treacherous but fun and interesting experiences. We'll leave it at that. How does that sound
Yeah,
good?
that sounds good, man.
I appreciate you being here, man. I
Yeah, glad to
appreciate
be
it.
here.
So this is episode one of the Peace Builder Academy podcast, or it might just be the Peace Builder podcast. We'll see what the audience likes, right? The purpose of this podcast is to really just have a conversation about how to achieve peace, but doing it as a solutions-based thinker,
Mhm.
not doing it as a idealist, not doing it as a person who gives word salad, like many of our politicians do. Sometimes I do, so correct me if I'm giving word salad. Please just cut me off short and say, "Hey, Chris, be more concrete. What does this mean?" Because I'm so tired of like just going into ether. And I've attended a number of different conferences that are in the peace building sector. I've attended different social impact conferences, and I've identified a few different things, man, that I don't know if you share this thought or not, but a lot of our peace building strategies and techniques are just highly ineffective. And I find them highly ineffective because we're not really dealing with root causes. We're not helping people survive and thrive. We're looking at doing things that might be useful, but after we teach people how to feed themselves, gain enough resources to provide for their families, have purpose aligned with mission, aligned with business, or some sort of wealth creation vehicle that would enable them to pull themselves out of poverty and then into a position of making peaceful resolutions because they're no longer hungry, right? Some of these resource-based wars we're fighting today are a direct example of how resources or the lack thereof can make conflict. And then we have ideological based wars, so right, Israel Palestine ideology. But some would argue that that's also a resource based war too, right?
Mhm.
Not enough Gazan resources resulted in hate for each other outside of the ideological reasons, right?
Mhm.
I know this is a touchy subject, so we'll try to stay YouTube friendly, but while being solutions based. So that's kind of the intention of this podcast overall and this conversation overall. But before I go on even further, I first want to know, who are you? Can you introduce us to the audience? And how did you come to this podcast?
So, Cody Huffman, I am the hippie capitalist, just jumping on this podcast and helping my friend out and to go ahead and talk about how we can bring peace back into the world. And I mean, that's really what we need because we're in a very, very treacherous, turbulent world at the moment. And I think if more people try to build peace and make their small impacts, it'll be a better place to live.
Thank you, man. And again, we used to be Army soldiers together, Army officers together, and then we both kind of saw the light, so to speak.
Mhm.
And I don't want to go into too many details on this podcast because we have other things to talk about, but we saw a light, let's call it, and we saw how ineffective trying to do peace building at the end of a gun and the end of a barrel will never be super effective. It
Yeah.
actually doesn't work, right? For every enemy we take out, we as in whoever takes out, you have a whole family, or at the very least four new enemies because they hate you now. And that's how this cycle of violence perpetuates. And it'll never end. Even the wars we're having today at this time will guarantee another century of war, unfortunately. So how do we break that cycle? That's overall we're going to try to do. Maybe today if we can get there, but overall the big picture mission and intent of this podcast. So if you have a maybe an answer, excellent, dude. Please share. If not, we'll try to break it down by the numbers.
My immediate answer, or at least my immediate thoughts on the situation, is again, it's people need to do those everyday impacts, helping their local communities as well as help community the best they can. If they can go ahead and just make a small impact for one or two people in their lives, like ripples in a pool, those ripples are going to expand. You're going to get more attributes connecting to everybody else. So I think that's the main thing that most people can do to go ahead and have that rather get sucked into social media and all those hype and emotionally driven type things. Focus on what you can do and what you can control. And it goes into Buddhist philosophy a lot.
So I'm going to take a note about what you just said. I'm hearing you say, think globally, act locally.
Yes.
All right, I like that. Let me write that down before I forget. And while I'm writing this down, man, the next question I have for you is, let's start early and big picture.
Mhm.
What is the meaning of life to you?
The meaning of life to me is the ability to do anything you want to do as long as it doesn't impact anyone else's life. Really, it's ultimate freedom for yourself and knowing yourself. That is my meaning of life.
The ability to do anything you want to do without hurting others. And what was the last thing you said?
And to know yourself as best you can be and become that perfect version of yourself. I just think that's an easy way to explain everything that I actually promote and everything that I believe in, and as well as pretty much give a good reason as to what an individual should do to grow in their journey.
What does that mean for you, man? What is a good individual and how does one become a good individual?
So a good individual is just somebody who takes care of friends, takes care of family, takes care of those around them who can't possibly return anything or give you anything in return. So no matter what, you're just a good person. You're going out there, you're putting out positive energy and helping people get through the day, as well as maybe learn lessons in life so that they can go ahead and move up.
I like it. So I wrote down something that you're saying and something that I've heard before as well from one of my mentors, Tom. Giving 110% without expecting anything in return. And that's what a good person is.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that. We'll move forward with this. Thank you. All right. The next big question. Now, this is a big one, man. I don't know. Brace yourself. This is what we're here for. How do we achieve peace? And peace, if you could define what peace is to you, and then however you interpret that question, just answer, and I'll take some notes.
So peace can be established for yourself or for communities. I think that personal peace is actually one of the hardest things to go ahead and establish because you're always constantly in turmoil with yourself. If your energy is negative towards yourself, your energy towards others is going to be negative as well. So I think the number one thing that most people need to work on is creating that good energy for themselves. Just having the ability to peacefully go outside and stare at a beautiful sunset. Like that's one way to go ahead and just get to peace so that you're not thinking about who posted something on a super crazy trip. It's just knowing that it'll come in the time. You don't need to worry about it. It's just simple, easy, and peaceful.
All right, I'm gonna play devil's advocate
Yep.
because earlier at the beginning of the podcast we said if I hear any word salad
Yep.
or if you hear word salad from me, you're gonna cut me off. I just heard a bunch of word salad.
Yeah.
Try like how for our users and for myself, what does good energy mean? What does peaceful way of getting good energy mean? And then I think you said meditation.
So I'd say the major thing is not overthinking on simple things. Like not overthinking on simple things like who did certain things in social media, who went ahead and posted things about you negatively. It's focusing on what you can and can control directly in front of you. That's really what that whole point is. So not too much word salad. Condense it a little bit.
So I'm writing down know your lane and stick to your lane,
Yeah, I would say
or is
know
that
your
a
lane,
little bit
stick
too
to your lane.
restrictive?
I'd say that's just about right for me.
Okay, I like it. Stick to your lane. All right, I like that we're gonna catch each other like this because it so often in the field that I'm in, the peace building sector, it's a ton of word salad, and I don't want to be too offstandish or I don't know the right word without being offensive, but offensive to the community. But I've found again that it's highly ineffective because we're not dealing with root cause analysis or root cause issues. I think a solution is to help people survive and thrive, but that's word salad, right? So what does that mean? Well, one, helping people gain access to economic opportunity, and a vehicle for that is wealth creation education. And you and I both have platforms for that. You have talk to me a little bit about your platform for how you're helping people acquire resources to solve the resource-based fight, let's call it.
So hippie capitalists go ahead and we focus on trying to help you understand the crypto stock markets as well as basic investments so that you can build a nest egg or a fund that you can always rely on so that you don't have the stress of money. That's really what we go ahead and focus over there on Hippie Capitalist. And that's all to obtain freedom because it's not about the money, it's about the freedom. That's really the whole thing that we do over in Hippie Capitalist. Get you there. Have time for your family, your friends, and anyone on the outside.
I like it, and the reason why I'm excited that you're here
Mhm.
is because after spending, oof, I mean, years, I mean, a decade, almost a decade of service, and then traveling over 55 countries at this point, probably more coming in the next few months, I found that people just want to survive and thrive. And what does that mean? It means surviving just means meeting the first layer of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Food, water, shelter, and then the other thing,
A
procreation.
little bit of that.
And then there's Maslow's hierarchy, right? There's more additional layers, and then the ultimate being
Mhm.
self-transcendence. And that's what I think thriving would be. So using Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which already exists, I'm a big fan of not creating new things. Just don't recreate the wheel. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Mhm.
I'm a big fan of that kind of philosophy. But Maslow gave us a really interesting pyramid to follow. Survive, first layer, those layers we
Mhm.
just talked about. And then after that, you got layer 2 and 3 and 4, and I don't remember how many layers, but the ultimate being self-transcendence, self-fulfillment. That's what I call thrive. And so the Peace Builder Academy, I imagine, then what we've been trying to do here at the very least is help you, one, attain resources. We use project management principles, business planning fundamentals, and then with people like you and other advisors, we have wealth creation techniques. But ultimately, it's being able to identify an opportunity and execute on that. Two ways. One, identify opportunity analysis. Is it worth it? Can I do it? Is it worth the risk and financial investment if there is one? And then two, is this something that can fulfill me? So we have something called a social business or an impact-driven business or a purpose-driven company, something like Tom Shoes or any organization that, the way I understand it, is like if it's a nonprofit that sustains itself. So it has business sustainability. So it doesn't rely on goodwill because goodwill runs out
Yep.
and donations run dry. Not so much because there's bad will or anything, but because recessions happen, wars happen, et cetera, et
Mhm.
cetera. And then after that, we need to provide another solution set. And so a solution set that the Peace Builder Academy focuses on is social entrepreneurs and social businesses, really marrying impact with income and purpose. And that's what I believe. That's what the Japanese call ikigai,
Mhm.
right? Purpose and then everything around fulfilling that
Yep.
purpose. Maslow calls it self-transcendence. So that's a little bit of my thoughts on that. What do you think about that?
No, that definitely is a lot clearer. Definitely clears up a lot of the word salad that I threw out there. So definitely listen to this guy. He knows a lot about going ahead and building that peace program as well as starting your social impact program. That these things because you're able to streamline the overall training apparatus so that people can better understand it.
I like it. I like it. All right, let's move on to the next question, man. What is a problem we can solve today, right now? Locally, globally, think of something.
I would say the biggest problem that we can go ahead and solve today, we do need some other people to go ahead and play into it. I would say climate change is real. We are seeing it a lot in our overall apparatus as well as the world with all these new hurricanes, all these floods. We actually saw some floods here in Thailand while we were here, and they were impacting a lot of people. You guys were doing a lot of volunteer work to
Yeah,
actually
some
save
recovery
them.
operations. Yeah, we have a pretty good group of volunteers right now that are currently, as we speak, they're um, helping rescue some people, feed the animals, feed all the people there. And I love the Thai people
Mhm.
because they're all smiles.
Oh
I
yes.
mean, they really live up to their name, Land of Smiles. It's true. Even in the catastrophe, disaster, they're still smiling
Mhm.
throughout. But we have a good team here, and they're doing some fantastic work. But just an example of how climate is impacting everything.
Mhm. And I think one of the biggest ways that people can go ahead and actually impact and have small impacts is obviously look at your vehicles, look at your amount of fossil fuel use, and do a self-assessment of those basic things. Now, on a bigger scale, what we need to do in order to get more renewable energy, I would say that we need to lean more towards nuclear, but that's just the capitalist coming out in me. Has the ability to produce more energy, way less of toxic exposure to the planet. And that's one thing that I think overall we could go ahead and impact today if they just go ahead and get these reactors back online.
I like it. So you got rid of a bit of not too much word salad,
Yep.
and I'm kind of a little tech geek sometimes at times in
Mhm.
nuclear energy. I studied material science for 3.5
Yep.
years, so it's not necessarily nuclear science. That's way harder,
Yeah.
but it's talking about the quantum fields and quantum, the small scale, right? We got the Cosmo, the big scale. We got what we see here, you and I. Let's call it normal
Yeah.
scale. Then we got the little tiny baby Ant-Man quantum scale, right? That thing is real. Quantumanium is real. And what I like about what you just said is that we can explore technologies already out there and repurpose it.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And then you kind of alluded to the hard part of that, bureaucracy, politics, or maybe just fear. I mean, there have been nuclear disasters that, I mean, it's scary. It's a scary thing. So I can understand. And that's why we're kind of so scared with Russia and Ukraine right now, right? A nuclear disaster would change the face of the planet irreparably.
Hmm.
So how do we prevent nuclear conflict? Because it's directly relative to today.
Yeah, so nuclear conflict is definitely, we're going to have a lot of governments, a lot of people, a lot of personalities and ego come together to understand that they need to go ahead and get nuclear back to where it needs to be, focused on energy and production versus atomic warfare. And unfortunately, there's going to be a couple of egos that need to go before that can actually happen.
Do you think this is more of ego management thing, or is this a cultural thing, or is this it's been 2,000 years of conflict, like, I don't even know why I hate you, but I do because it's ingrained in our culture? Or is this what do you think the root cause of this conflict comes from?
That one's actually a little bit tricky. I'm gonna have to chop up a little bit of the word salad, but personally, I think it all comes down to demographics, and you're normally going to see these more warring periods as the male population outstrips the female population, and I think that's a period that we're going into on this planet. Unfortunately, is the male population is outstripping the female population.
Interesting perspective. I definitely want to unpack that. I know Peter Zeihan, he has Geopolitics channel, I believe. Fantastic channel. He talks a lot about demographic collapse and how if you can study the demographic changes and trends, then you could somewhat predict potential conflict or potential periods and points of innovation. Peter Drucker also identifies 7 opportunity areas for innovation to emerge from. And what's very interesting here is that he talks about demographic changes. Specifically, he notes that in the 1980s, Japan identified that they're going to face a aging population and started investing heavily into robotics. So as we may or may not know, that Japan had like a 10-year global lead over everybody else regarding robotics and technology to prepare for this. And I think we're seeing this transition and pivot globally as well. Speaking about demographics as well, a lot of people believe that Russia and Ukraine may be facing a huge demographic collapse, obviously because of the war, but also it may have been one of the last period opportunity areas for Russia to invade. That's another example of how demographics can really influence decision-making apparatuses. I like that you brought that up. So demographic / population shifts or changes can cause conflict.
Yes, that's one of the major things that I've noticed is as your demographics go from the balance of having more females than males and gets closer to more of an even level or actually pushes over, we're going to have more wars in the world.
Interesting. Okay.
And it also goes a little bit into the whole boomers and how we have an aging population all across the world. So some other things at play.
I like this. We're getting somewhere, man. We're getting somewhere. We're getting beyond the word salad and we're starting to talk root cause analysis. So this is great work. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Oh, the next one is Cody questions. Do you have any questions of me?
Well, I actually have a couple of questions. Like, how would somebody actually get involved with Grassroots Peace Builders and actually take advantage of all your lessons that you go ahead and you teach?
That's the shameless question plug. The shameless plug question. I didn't tell him to do it, but
No, I was going to ask it anyway.
Yeah, it's literally www.peacebuilderacademy.com. It's there. And if you want to learn how to launch a social impact project and turn that into a business, an impact-driven business, you could go there and learn everything there for about an hour a day, maybe if you're fast, 30 days. But if you're normal, 60 days or less, for any high school motivated or above education level, come and learn for free. I would love to have you. We have monthly meetings for free consultations, and then the whole academy is free. If you want to move faster, you spend $10 a month just for templates, community, etc. The point here is to remove all barriers of entry for information, access, whatever, and just get you to start, know where to go, finish. That's the point of this. And this is how we make the world better, one person, one problem, and hopefully one solution at a time.
That's great, man. That is literally everything that I think they need to hear. If anyone wants to go ahead and get involved, this is your guide to actually speak to. And I actually want to go ahead and jump into a couple other questions. What is impact for you? How do you define impact?
Oof, dang, that's a good one, man. And I didn't prepare for that one. Hmm. So impact to me has a social or a public goods pivot. So a lot of people used to use like social entrepreneur, but I think it has too much of a social media connotation. But really, it speaks to an impact-driven entrepreneur or a purpose-driven entrepreneur, and that's more word salad in my opinion, right? So what does that mean? It just means anything aligning with a. I like using the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals because it gives us 17 industries, let's call them, or sectors that we could help, like food alleviation, poverty alleviation, um, more education for women, public housing, and there's more as well, right? And then there's a hybrid model of that. So everything we do aligns with one of those 17 SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, and then each one of those goals has targets. And I think there's 127 plus targets that you can create a business around. And then one of the lessons I have is how to one is about learning about the SDGs, but then two, I give an example of a social business operating in that. So you'll get 17 examples, plus there's a link to another 20, I believe, so that you can literally learn how to take a good positive intention, impact, which was how I define impact, making a desire to make a positive difference or a positive intention and desire to execute on that intention and make a positive change impact. And then how to create a business model around that. Because I think if you could do good and learn how to make good money at the same time, you've solved one of the world's hardest problem sets, how to survive and thrive. Remember the survival piece, feed belly, feed family. The thrive piece, self-transcendence. How do I see myself and how do I become the best version of myself? I think first we solve the resource problem, wealth creation, project management, etc., business planning frameworks, etc. I have a T4I model. Take idea, turn that into impact first. And for that, we teach project management fundamentals, specifically agile project management fundamentals, which will just, a lot of people get confused. Well, what is project management? Dude, it's just planning.
Yeah.
I mean, we did a lot of that in the,
That's all the military.
actually, it was super frustrating, right? Like we're officers, we're thinking we're going to go in and do good things, and we did good things. But man, there's a lot of paperwork planning. I'll tell you what though, as I forget his name, and maybe you could help me out, but planning to fail or failing to plan is planning to fail.
Mm.
It's one general, I forget his name, but in that regard, that's what project management is. So you'll learn how to plan a project, a specifically impact-driven project around the SDGs. And then after that, how do you sustain that impact, right? If you're a nonprofit, you're likely going to face friction point at the very least because goodwill runs out, not because they're bad people, because things change. So we teach business planning for that. And so that one specifically is something called lean business planning. And it's how to operate with a minimum viable product. If I have only $100, and there's a book called The $100 Startup by Chris Galepo, I believe. Again, how do you operate with a bare minimum, if not, or no money at all? So we teach some fundamentals for how to do that. And so that's the idea to impact. And then we do an influence phase, which is social media, things we're doing now. Like people don't know about you or your services or your company, they'll learn about this. But it's also how you build the social proof and the authority and the confidence so that people can trust you. And then you can leverage that goodwill, that influence for business and making income. So idea to impact, impact to influence, use that influence to generate sales for income. And that's the overall framework, right? But all of it is aligned with Ikigai, purpose, what the Japanese call purpose, or the 17 SDGs. Okay, evaluate me. How was that? Was that clear or is that a bunch of word salad?
There was a little bit of word salad in there, but towards the end, you actually cleared a lot of that up. So, I mean,
Okay.
you got to the point towards the end.
Is there anything we could clarify for the audience?
Yeah, I would actually say let's go a little bit more into the Ikigai and exactly how this program will actually help them work through that Ikigai.
Ikigai. All right, and I'm pulling it up here on the background so I don't misquote anything. So Ikigai as a Japanese is a Japanese concept referring to something that gives a person a sense of purpose or a reason for living. And I'm looking at this wireframe or this Venn diagram, and it says what you love, passion and purpose, what the world needs, vocation, what you can be paid for, profession, what are you good at, your passion. So it's mixing income, interest, and impact,
Mhm.
and that goal together. And that's what, at the for the very least, the Japanese call purpose, and that's what's most fulfilling. So we have a whole module on this. I have module one. It's called self mastery and developing a winning mindset. And the purpose there is just to understand strengths and weaknesses, highlight strengths, eliminate weaknesses, to identify what you're good at. So that's interest. Two, once you've aligned with some sort of idea,
Mhm.
understanding yourself masterfully, at least that's what we're trying to get for. Another piece of word salad, right? So let me remove that word, but masterfully. Understanding strengths and weaknesses, and you go through a ton of different exercises. We have funnels, ideal funnels, we have passion funnels, but more specifically, you'll be taking actual tests for personality tests, strengths and weaknesses tests, etc., to identify what you're good at if you don't already know,
Mhm.
which most people do, but some people just need an external person to be like, hey, dude, you're not that good at this. Even though you love basketball, you're not. It's a high probability you might not make it.
Yep.
And that's what we got paid to do before, right? Like, sir, ma'am, boss, leader. With medium or strong confidence, our assessment is that this could go bad or could go wrong, could go right or wrong
Mhm.
based on these indicators. And that's kind of the perspective I'm looking at least. And I appreciate having you here because we have another intelligence perspective at the
Oh,
very
yeah.
least. Military intelligence, to be specific, not CA,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Nothing cool guy like that.
Some cool guy stuff,
Yeah.
but not that much. But interesting planning
Mhm.
capacity, phenomenal planners at the
Oh,
very
yeah.
least. So, so that's what I understand Ikigai to be, and helping a user to really just understand themselves on a deeper level. That's more work salad. So we provide tools and exercises and techniques that are around concepts like Ikigai, around concepts of understanding interest, looking at career planning, life planning, using real skills. So we did as former
Mhm.
officers, and we also identified in the academic universities and in the school place, as well as the on-the-job training, professional workplace, putting that all together into tools and frameworks that people could hopefully use to understand themselves just a little bit better. And that prepares them to choosing or creating a path for choosing one of those 17 STGs to then create a project and a business around. How does that sound?
That's actually much clearer, and actually leads into the question I have for you. So now that we have the base levels of impact and your definitions of impact, how do we actually achieve that enlightenment after we make the impact?
Ooh, okay. Well, how do you define enlightenment, first of
So
all?
enlightenment for me is just understanding yourself in every aspect of yourself, your personality as well as your spiritual self. That's literally self-enlightened for me, is understanding everything that is you and how to become the best version of you.
All right, I like it. I agree with that, but I want to add another layer to the enlightenment
Yeah, go for it.
definition, and I like the Buddhist way. So the Buddhists say a lot of people think that enlightenment and nirvana are the same thing, but they're not. Right? The average person, at least in my observation and my own way of thinking before I did some work in the temple, was that enlightenment was
Mhm.
nirvana. And my uninformed understanding of enlightenment at the very beginning was that nirvana was like heaven.
Mhm.
It's heaven. It's what Christians know as heaven. It's what Buddhists know as heaven, right? But in reality, it's at least what I've come to learn, and I can only speak from limited knowledge. I'm not a master. I've come to see it a different way based on what I've done, my own spiritual practices with meditation and some psychedelia and other practices, but also talking to the monks directly and learning from them. And so enlightenment just means seeing the world as it really is. And so the monks talk about understanding the triple gem, like the major takeaways of reality, the major fundamentals of reality. One, life is suffering. But life isn't just suffering. They don't mean suffering as in like, oh, you're always gonna be in pain. It just means a period or a state of non-satisfaction. No control. So there's no control. So the example I came to learn was when you get hungry, how much control do you have of your body after you're hangry?
Yeah, not too much.
When you get tired, how much control do you have before you go to sleep?
You're not able to force yourself out of it. So definitely
It's And so using
And
these
then,
kind of fundamental understandings of what control is and how much control we have of our own body, kind of really really helps me understand, like, okay, maybe it's my ego saying that I have control when I really don't.
mhm,
And then the last thing, no self. And the concept here is that we're constantly, even now, we're exchanging electron at the subatomic level, we're exchanging energy, frequency, vibration, molecules, etc. Even when I tap this, I'm interacting, and there's a direct
mhm.
interaction with the field of energy here. No self is also the notion that I'm breathing in molecules of air that come from everywhere in the world, right? The oldest molecules potentially in the world are in my body right now and then being pushed out. So in that regard, there is no self physically. So that's how I came to understand what enlightenment means, just seeing the world as it really is. And nirvana then is achieving a sense of a cessation of suffering. Cessation of suffering for the monks or the Buddhists simply means that we understand the true nature of desire, and the only way, at least for them, to not eliminate desire, but to what's a good word for this? The word they use is cessation, which is the elimination of desire. And how they do that is by using a meditative practice. So if they understand, let's say I'm hungry right now, and through meditation and meditative practice, I could identify, like, okay, one, you acknowledge the feeling. So the first thing they do is acknowledge, like, okay, acknowledge, hungry, 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 acknowledge. And the mere act of one identifying the thought and then acknowledging the thought causes it to transform. And so in this regard, this is how you can be present at all time. You identify thought. What am I thinking right now? Right now, I'm trying to respond to you. Also, my hands are a little bit cold because maybe I'm a little bit nervous, and I'm very highly conscious of what I'm thinking of right now. And then I'm also looking around because we have a beautiful environment here. And then, as for the example of like maybe being nervous with cold fingers,
Mhm.
the mere fact of acknowledging it helped it transform. And now they're actually starting to get warmer. So just that's an example of how identifying and acknowledging the intention or thought that you're currently focused on will help it transform. And as my understanding is that you get better at this practice, you get better at transforming those thoughts, or rather eliminating those thoughts. And then when those thoughts no longer impede you, that's when you have a cessation, the end of suffering, because you've learned how to identify and work and control and eliminate desire. That is nirvana.
Okay. So, I mean, basically, it's mind over matter with a lot more focus, is a simple way of putting it.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. And the Buddha said, do more good, do no evil, purify the
Mhm.
mind. And for monks, they have a sixth sense. The sixth sense is the mind. So, yeah, that's a good way to look at it. Okay, so I forgot the second part of your question.
So the second part of my question was, how does a person actually move through the stages and reach that self enlightenment now that they have that impact?
Move through the stages to reach self enlightenment. All right, so I'm going to tell you what I did.
Mhm.
I don't, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychologist. I could only tell you the journey I've been on, and it's helped me. And I don't even have enough hubris to say that I've achieved enlightenment. I don't know if I have or not. I know I'm in the right direction,
Mhm.
but I don't feel confident enough to say I'm there. But I took a six-pronged approach. One was, of course, physical fitness is huge. So all the normal stuff like good sleep, physical hygiene, all that stuff, normal, right? Um, I had a leadership coach help me unlock quite a few layers about my ego, about my shadow self and my
Mhm.
current self, and how to integrate my various selves into one. I also am part of a 12-step program, and I've learned a lot in any 12-step program. One of the greatest takeaways is that you're kind of forced, not forced, but asked to do a huge amendment list of people you've caused harm to in any way, and then you share that with someone else. And then the hardest part, which took me forever to do, was you try to make amends to them.
Mhm.
And think about, like, someone you may have hurt deeply in the past. At the very least, you got to try to make an amend. And that was hard for me. And I don't want to go into too many details. It'll take too much time,
Mhm.
maybe another podcast, but it was a tough one. But having that, finishing that amends list and actually trying to make that amends at the very least, and I would say 80% of people were receptive and were willing to, at the very least, open a conversation. 20% weren't, and it's okay. That's okay too. Helped me unlock a lot of stuff, man.
Mhm.
A lot of stuff about. my own first of all, I identified patterns of like patterns of misbehavior and how to at the very least acknowledge those and then work a plan to overcome them. So that's 12 step. I also did psychedelia, which we may explore in the near future.
Oh, yeah.
But exploring psychedelics, specifically psilocybin, really helped me unlock a lot. I feel like I almost feel like I got a shortcut to not, I don't want to say enlightenment, because again, I don't think I've achieved it, but I definitely see more of reality. And so a lot of people, Johns Hopkins has a program like that. They've been studying this for years. You know, psychedelics are starting to re-enter common the mainstream. But this is ancient science. Ayahuasca was an ancient science that the Mayans used in the Amazon, right? So this is an ancient science. Same thing with hemp. Same thing with all of these psychedelia. They could have been, if we look at the Stone Age theory, they could have been the reason why we're here today in this form, right? Because they believe our ancestors may have been eating these magic mushrooms from the wood or cow dung or whatever,
Mhm.
and that helped them create new synapses or what is it,
Mm.
synapses in the brain?
Yeah, synapses connection. So
Do you know a little bit more? Do you want to speak on that?
basically, the way that it works is it actually impacts your serotonin channels and actually allows you to go ahead and create new thought pathways throughout your actual brain matter. And it increases the length as well as increases the myelin sheath and intensity that you can actually create those thought patterns. So that's a beautiful thing about the science of how mushrooms work.
I like it. I like it. So that's just another avenue of approach. Of course, everything to do with caution. But I mean, I spent years looking for um, reality, trying to see reality. And I'll speak a little bit of my journey. I did meet God
Mhm.
consciousness, and I was almost an atheist after before, and now I'm far closer to a spiritual practice. And then, they some people claim, like I think Tesla and Einstein say, I'm not sure if both of them, but they say, the true nature of reality is energy, frequency, vibration. And when I first heard that, especially when we we're still in the army, dude, I thought that's some new age crap. But when you do some psychedelics, you can see that.
Mhm.
So I feel like it's a shortcut to seeing reality as it really is. And then there's a few more practices I kind of totally forgot off the top of my head, but using a multi-pronged attack like that or multi-pronged approach to really try to understand root cause analysis, at least for myself, help me one identify patterns and work solutions for overcoming them. I hope that answers your question.
It actually very, very much does. And the whole reason I wanted to ask you that question is so that you are able to convey that you've had to work through some things as well and that you've had to follow the path, because the only people that can lead others are the ones that walk the path themselves. And I know you definitely have, man, tremendously over the years. And that's why I think you're one of the most enlightened people I know. So that's why
Oh well, thank you.
anyone should talk to you and actually
Oh
get into
man,
your program.
get a little bit, can't pump me up too much. My ego will get triggered, and then I'll go backwards, man. But no,
Yeah.
thank you for saying that. But it's a lifelong journey, right? And that's I think we're all on this lifelong journey.
Mhm.
I always like to say a bunch of tiny baby steps in the right direction eventually equal a giant leap forward. And that's just continue making baby steps forward.
Oh yeah, every day.
All right, and then dude, I think that's my last question, man. Do you have any final comments or anything you want to share with the audience? Any major takeaways that you've had or life lessons that you have around the peace building field? Maybe some critical lesson you learned while you're in the army and why you got out.
So one of the critical lessons I learned while I was in the army and got out is that it's not as serious as the army makes it out to be. There's a lot of things that go on, but once you get out, you'll learn that everyday life can be a whole lot more peaceful. You just have to be able to spend time with yourself, learning yourself and who you actually are, because military service, you're a group. You are a group, you are a team, you are not an individual. And then you get out, and suddenly you're an individual again. So you have to relearn who you are. It's one of the biggest lessons I had to go ahead and work through myself, and why I'm doing a lot of my self development work.
So if I was to write a quick sentence, what would that be on what you just said?
Take the time to learn who you are once you get out of the service. I would say that's probably the easiest way to figure that out.
Oof. And last question, because this is a good one.
Mhm.
What was the biggest unlock for you, man? What was the biggest tactic, technique, procedure, TTP, that helped you at the very least become more comfortable with the version of you right now?
I would say definitely the morning meditations that I do. Quite literally, the first thing I do in the morning is I wake up, have my coffee, I go sit on the porch, and I quite literally just think, stare at a beautiful scenery, and just think about everything that is going on, and focusing on what I can control. And that's one of the biggest things that I've been able to do.
I like it. I like it. And it's something I like to talk to my friends a lot about, solitude versus loneliness.
Mhm.
And at first, it's the same thing, right? It's being alone. It's the state of being alone, but I've come to understand it's the interpretation of that state of being alone.
Mhm.
So if you weren't here, right, I'd be by myself, right? The way I've come to understand the difference between solitude and loneliness, and correct me if I'm wrong, or please share a different perspective if you have it, is if I'm alone and I desire other people's company, I'm lonely. But if I'm alone and I'm enjoying my own company or just not at all missing anybody else, then that's solitude.
Mhm.
And I've come to learn that solitude over loneliness is powerful, but loneliness makes being alone unbearable. And that's what usually, at least for me, has led me to trouble. Thoughts?
I mean, pretty much it's the exact same for me. I mean, as long as I'm with the right people, I don't feel lonely. However, it's the same thing like you said. If you're spending time alone and you don't feel like you need to be around other people, you don't need to have anything else in your life, you're just in solitude. I mean, you're not really having to worry about what other people think at that point in time. So it's good. It's peaceful. It's how you actually get to that achieving peace.
I like it. I
Inner
like
peace,
it.
anyway.
All right, so we're pretty much done. We're at our time, man. One, I want to say thank you so much for being here, man. It's been a long time coming. We've known each other for years. One more question, if you don't mind. Why did you get out of the service? What did you learn that made you want to get out?
Basically, it's that we're going to be fighting endless wars forever until we all decide that, and we being the majority of the people on the face of the earth, decide that we're no longer interested in war. We actually want to move towards peace. And that's one of the things that I learned in the army. It's going to keep going, and more wars are going to happen because there are a lot of organizations that are pushing for war in order to make more money, which is unfortunately the capitalist side, but it's one of those evils that does exist in the world that needs to change.
I like it. I like what you just said, and thank you for saying that. And I had a follow-on question, but I totally forgot it. But we'll move on. Thank you for the time. It was something in the court of some of the light, or okay, one last one. You got out, you're no longer in uniform, and now you're doing another project. You kind of alluded to it earlier, but you were one of my first peace builders, man. We kind of helped create this together, this notion. And specifically for peace building, what has been the greatest peace building tool, technique that you find, aside from the meditative practice? What about something that others can use on top of meditation?
That's a tricky one. I would say that the number one thing for peace building is just being able to be present. Yeah, I would literally say that's what it is. Just being able to be present, focusing on what you can control at the single moment that you can control it, and that's it. And I know you said earlier there is no control, but there are certain things in our lives that I do think that we have the ability to focus on and not worry about the rest.
Like it. And, it's not so much about there is no self or no control. It's like there are aspects of control, but at the most fundamental layer, there's kind of no control in that regard. However, we still live in this reality. We still live here. We still have responsibilities, very real responsibilities. If you're a father, you have very real duty to your children. If you're a husband, you have very real duty to your partner, right? So we have these duties, and these duties, we can't shirk those duties and responsibilities. So this is not at all an excuse of like, oh, there's no self, don't do anything, no accountability.
Yeah.
It's about taking ruthless accountability and then using a process for how to capitalize on opportunities, identify them, and then hopefully create some project or business that's going to make the world better.
Mhm.
Doing good and making good money so you can do more good.
Yeah, that's
Dude,
easy.
thank you so much, man. That's all I have. Any closing comments are yours? Anything you want to pitch? How do they find you?
So if you want to find me, there's actually going to be a school link that'll be included in the video. It's just going to be the Hippie Capitalist. Talk about anything in there. finance, or freedom. And that's literally what we focus on.
Cody, thank you for your time, man.
Thank
Looking
you.
forward to another one.